Okay, so anyway, I was a single parent with 4 children, and in 2003, I bought 5 acres of raw land in Lumbee, British Columbia. And I didn't have a whole lot of money. I had a mortgage, and um so I went in the process of, getting the septic put in, and the well, and the hydro, and I moved uh, a mobile, a 12 by 70 mobile onto the property. And of course, it was really a small. It had 3 bedrooms, and there was 5 of us. So anyway, I decided that I would build a house on this property, and I started building it. And I came home. I was going through nursing school at UBC Okanagan at that time, and I came home one day, and there was this stop work order hammered to my partially built house, telling me I had to get a building permit. Well, I went and I got the forms for the building permit, and I looked at this heinous document that they weren't responsible for their inspections, and they could add liabilities that were incidental to the permit, and it had some pretty horrific unconstitutional verbiage in it. And even at that time, I was around 45 years old. I even knew then that something inherently, was wrong with this thing. And I just crumpled it up and said, if they're not liable for anything, I don't need their services. So I went ahead and I built this house. And we happily lived in this house for 9 years. Well, then the regional district for the North Okanagan, in short, they said, this house is illegal. If you don't get the proper permits, we're going to demolish your house, which was quite threatening at that time. And there was this group that studied Freeman on the land and all of these different things, and I joined the group and said, can you help me in this situation that I'm in? And they said they could, and they were submitting claim of rights, and doing all these different processes where we get letters back saying, your paperwork is of no legal force and effect, and we recommend you get legal advice, and all of this stuff. So it was a really scary situation for me to be in, and I've never balked at the law and stuff before. I was quite a goody two shoes, really. I just minded my P's and Q's. I didn't speed. I didn't, smoke, do drugs, drink. I was a good little servant. And I really, came up against it because I really felt that it was against all conscience for me to sign that building permit. And anyway, in this group, I got introduced also to an accountant. She said she was an accountant who used to work for Canada Revenue Agency, who had this process of doing everybody's income taxes that would allow us to get all of our income tax back that we paid in, and as a nurse, I had paid a lot of income tax. So she charged everybody quite handsomely, and she represented, a whole bunch of people that I knew and us, and did our income tax. But I thought I was going to get to see the income tax before she submitted it, because I needed to sign it. Well, she sent it in without us seeing it or getting to sign it. And as a consequence, I ended up with a $72,000 notice of assessment saying that I was grossly negligent, that I either knew or ought to have known that what she was doing was illegal. And they slapped me with a $72,000 administrative penalty for this, which was really ironic because my husband, who the property, wasn't in his name, we hadn't really been together a long time. They didn't give him any administrative fee, but he had no assets to attack. So I was dealing with, a couple things at the same time between
She frozen?
So, okay, so what was really interesting is the trailer that I had put on the land was registered to the land, and I had been paying property tax on it and getting, the homeowner's grant because of the trailer, because it was registered. But the house I built was not registered. And I wrote out an affidavit saying, I built this house under a claim of right. It's mine. And if they demolish it, it constitutes theft. So I didn't know much about representing myself in court. So the judge ended up reading my affidavit in court on my behalf, which I found really interesting because in my eyes, it was all true. And it obviously had to have some truth for it for him to read it in. So that was cool. But in the end, I ended up out of fear taking down this house that had a value of $300,000 because I absolutely refused to get the building permit and sign this heinous document. So I took the house down instead and saved all the materials, sold some or whatever. So, but then I'm dealing with this $72,000 notice of assessment. And I was, looking to appeal that. And then I got laid off work as an RN. And here's the interesting thing that I realize now that I didn't realize back then is back when they had that H1N1 scare, and I was working in a facility with 84 elderly residents, and my husband was working in another facility, and they had cottages that had like 18 residents in various cottages. And during that H1N1, none of the nurses took that vaccine, and they were sending bags of it back because we had looked at all the ingredients and everything, and we went, we're not taking this. But in the meantime, all the residents were given that vaccine. Now, I didn't give any of the vaccines because I work night shift, and you don't give vaccines at, from 10 o'clock till 6 in the morning. They're sleeping. So I never received it and I never gave it. But what I noticed after that shot, because I was keeping track of it, that 15% of those residents died in a 3-month period. And it was quite alarming to me. And I didn't realize that until the COVID shots came out, that the H1N1, they actually pulled that vaccine because it caused 50 deaths or something. Well, I'll tell you, it caused more than that. But I didn't know it had even been pulled until this COVID, came around. But that's kind of like a side note. But it was really interesting because they laid off in residential care 800 nurses in British Columbia. And it wasn't until, COVID came out, and I thought, wow, isn't that interesting that all these registered nurses that didn't get the shot were getting laid off in residential care? And I think it was because we had enough brains to, read about the shot. And I think that if we were going to be asked to give this COVID vaccine, which we couldn't if we followed our nursing practice, because you couldn't get the ingredients, you couldn't get the roots, you couldn't get the counter interactions, you couldn't get the information that you needed to get informed consent to give the shot. And I think now that that's why 800 of us were laid off. It just thinking about it now. So anyway, here I am. I've got a $72,000 notice assessment. I just got laid off. I've got to remortgage my property in like less than a year. And if you've got a $72,000 notice of assessment, you're not going to get a remortgage if you owe income tax like that. So, and then my appeal to that $72,000 notice of assessment, it was taking a long time. And I realized that I wasn't going to be able to clear this $72,000 in time, like for my remortgage, that I was essentially like screwed. And apparently CRA actually does this on purpose. But before all of that even happened, and Donna was getting like cranky, and this group, we were trying all of these different remedies and everything. So before I had gotten laid off, I actually allowed TD Bank to foreclose on me intentionally. I saved all the payments and everything so I could redeem the mortgage, but I was making myself in a situation where I'd have to go to court. So that's what I did. And it's interesting because the lawyers asked for a 1-day redemption period. Now, according to the Law and Equity Act, you've got 6 months to redeem yourself. But if you don't know enough about the law, they'll ask for 1 day. And if you don't pay up everything in 1 day, the foreclosure is finalized. So thank goodness I knew enough to say, pursuant to the, Law and Equity Act, I get a 6-month redemption period. So, but when I went to court, I took the registration of live births with me. And I think from the paperwork that I had been putting in, that the judge figured, oh, he's, got one of those kooks coming in the courtroom. And he did, because I was using a lot of free man on the land, I'm not a person, and all this stuff. So when he started the court proceedings, and like everybody is in there in the gallery and everything. It wasn't just my case, it was other people. And he asked if I was present, right? And I stood up and said, yes, I am. And I am. So he says, okay, like sit down. I wasn't called in to their box yet, but he wanted to know if I was in the courtroom. So after a while, my name got called, and I went into their box where, the table is for the people that case is being proceeded over, right? And when I get up there, I hold up the registration of live birth right up in my, I raise it up my hand, and the clerk was shocked, and she looked like I had smacked her over the face with it. Right. And I'm a lot for the non-verbal stuff. So the judge asked for it, and I had the registration of live birth on one side, and I had a claim of right on the other. And he took it and he wrote something down from it. So we went through all the proceedings, and they foreclose on me, and I leave, and I'm apologizing to my husband and stuff, and I'm going, yeah, sorry, hon, I tried, and I just, got foreclosed on, and like it was going to cost us like 10 grand for legal fees for, the other side, for the lawyers. Anyway, the lawyers weren't giving me the numbers to redeem the mortgage, and there was only 2 weeks of the redemption period left. Well, maybe not, maybe there was 3 weeks. So I put in an application to the court to make them give me the amount I needed to redeem, like the mortgage, and that I would pay it. And it was like 30 grand. So anyway, the judge says, well, they'll give you the amount, and you pay it, within a week, and it's all good. Well, I go to the TD Bank to get the information on how much I need to redeem the mortgage, and lo and behold, it's pending discharge. And I thought that the lawyers had paid the mortgage and had bought it and were waiting like to sell it. And I thought their fingers were in the cookie jar. But now I believe that when I gave the registration of birth and the look on the clerk's face, that I actually discharged the mortgage because he wrote something down from the registration of live birth, whether it was a birth certificate number or the certificate number from the registration of live birth. And when you look at the Law and Equity Act, it actually like states in there that the judge has the power to discharge the mortgage if the money is paid. And I think I paid the money, but I didn't understand. So I ended up undoing all of that, paying the 30 grand. So that was done. Well, then I'm dealing with this $72,000 notice of assessment. And I thought, I'm just going to have to go bankrupt. And at that time too, Canada Revenue Agency got a hold of me, the criminal prosecution people, and they were criminally charging this accountant because she had done this to like 205 people. And so she was being criminally charged, and they wanted me to witness against her. So anyway, I get all my debts and all my information together to go and claim bankruptcy. So I go to this bankruptcy trustee place, and I have a meeting to go through everything. And I'm sitting there going through all my debts and stuff. And we get to this notice of assessment. And this lady, she says, oh, well, you have to prove that you're not being criminally charged for gross negligence with Canada Revenue Agency before you can claim bankruptcy. She packed up all of her books and she left the room. And I'm sitting there and I'm like stunned, right? Like, weren't we just having a meeting? Like, what was that, right? She just, no goodbye, like nothing. She just left. So anyway, I got a hold of Canada Revenue Agency to prove that I wasn't being criminally charged. So then they do all their paperwork and stuff and call me in, and I sign into bankruptcy. Well, the real interesting thing that happened to me, this one of these coincidences, was Donna Marie Stancer, the accountant, had the same trustee as me. And this trustee said that, oh, the judge would have never let her discharge from bankruptcy had he known that she was going to do this stuff, right? And I thought to myself, I thought she was claiming bankruptcy because of all her legal woes and her criminal charges, not that she was discharged from bankruptcy. But anyway, it kind of stuck in my head, and I signed into bankruptcy, and I go home and I'm all depressed, right? Well, I start thinking about that. Well, here's where more coincidences happen. In the lawsuit with the regional district, because I was putting in all this freeman stuff, and that is kind of what this accountant was using as well. In the case law and the book of authorities that the regional district had submitted to take me to court about the building permit, they had her case law in there regarding her discharge from bankruptcy, which was really interesting because they basically said, well, until you do this and this and this, we won't discharge you from bankruptcy. And what had happened was, I think, like, her husband had died, and I think she was concerned that if she was not discharged from bankruptcy, that she would lose her entitlements to his will or whatever. I don't know. I'm just surmising. So anyway, I thought, wow, is that ever interesting? And then I realized that they discharged her from bankruptcy 6 months before they criminally charged her. Now, here's where I was going, wait a minute. If I have to prove I'm not being criminally charged to go bankrupt, and she has to get discharged from bankruptcy to be criminally charged, 1 + 1 freaking ends equals 2. I'll say that again. If I have to prove that I am not being criminally charged to go bankrupt, and they have to get her to discharge from bankruptcy to criminally charge her, what is up with that? What is going on? Here was another interesting thing when I started looking at all this. In my documents with the regional district, in one of the affidavits that they had some internal documents concerning my property. And they had a 2-page document in there that said that I had legal title and equitable title of the property. And I knew enough about trust law that I knew you couldn't be trustee for your own benefit. That when those two titles merge, that the legal title consumes the equitable title and the equitable title disappears, which is the beneficial part of the property. So the legal title is the trustee part, and the equitable title is the beneficial part. But when they're merged, all that's left is the trustee, the legal liability part. So the Crown Corporation administers over this trust, like any trust. It can be the registration of a vehicle, registration of a house, the registration of our birth certificates. They administer over that trust, and we're the trustee. So in absence of a beneficiary, they become a de facto beneficiary. So they can tell the trustee, employee of the Crown, to do all these things, get down, give me 20, go through this hoop, get a building permit, go get a driver's license, do this, do that. And there's all these laws on us because we are the employees and we are the trustees of this estate. So we aren't the legal name, but we're legally attached to that name as trustees. This is what I discovered. Now, the interesting thing about this, if you go to, I've got a Canadian law dictionary. And if you go through there and you look up words like beneficiary and mergers and trusts and trustee and equitable title, and you start looking up all of those, you realize, pretty quickly what's going on. But if you look up the definition of individual, okay, an individual is a natural person who is under the Canadian Bill of Rights, not the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, but the Canadian Bill of Rights. And only Section 15 of the Charter applies to natural persons, individuals, which means they can be recognized as a person under the law, but they're not obligated to. Well, an individual is defined in 2 acts, the Income Tax Act and the Bankruptcy and Insolvency Act. And if you look under the bankruptcy section of the Income Tax Act, Section 128, subsection 2 of that act states, and I'm going to paraphrase, it basically says, when it comes to a bankruptcy, that for all purposes of the act, the trustee is agent. Well, I'm not the trustee, because what happened when I went bankrupt is the administrator of the trust, the Crown, gave the bankruptcy trustee limited trusteeship under the Bankruptcy Insolvency Act and allowed the legal title and the equitable title to be unmerged. They're separated, which that's what the administrator can do. So as a result, I became beneficiary and the Crown Corporation became the trustee. Okay. So, that's what happened to me. And I was just, I wasn't sure what was going on, but when I went bankrupt and I lost that property and everything that I had worked for in 50 years of my life, I went through, a severe depression. And my lovely husband, who went to the ends of the earth with me, followed me through that depression. And we ended up leaving Lumbee, British Columbia. And we went up to Windy Mountain, up by Interlakes in the Caribou. And we took some of the materials from the house that I had tore down, and we built a small cabin and we squatted on Crown land. And I was just depressed, but I must admit it was one of the best things that I ever did, because we were snowed in there and we didn't have power, and we played games and following this. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Are you following this?
Oh, yeah.
It's interesting. It's interesting. So anyway, these agents from the Natural Resource Office came out to our cabin, and they said, there's no squatters' rights in BC. And I said, I'm not squatting. And they said, you have to leave or we're going to tear it down. So anyway, I said, well, no, I'm the undischarged bankrupt of, the Donna Jean Stevenson estate. And I don't have to. And so what they ended up doing was they filed a notice of civil claim to kick both my husband and I off this Crown land. And so they went to serve us with it. And I said, listen, I said, I'm not the trustee. I said, this is a matter for the trustee, not me. So I'm not taking it. Well, they kept on changing it. And then they put Donna Patterson on there, and they were just really trying to get me to accept this. So finally I was like, well, this isn't working with these assholes. I'll just take it. So I took the notice of civil claim, and what I did was I wrote the Queen, and I said, listen, I gave her that I was an undischarged bankrupt, and I gave her a copy of the order from the notice of civil claim. And in a one-page letter, I explained, I said, I'm an undischarged bankrupt. I'm not the trustee. I need intervention in this matter because these assholes aren't listening to me. Well, I wrote that on the 14th. And I received this letter back from the Queen with a date of the 24th on it. Beautiful paper and envelope. I have it. And it basically said that it wasn't the position of the Queen to intervene, but I was to look to her ministers for assistance in the matter, and that they would pass on my approach to the Queen to the Governor General and make him aware of my issues. Okay, so I thought, okay. So I put in a notice of demand to the Minister of Natural Resources, to the Attorney General, to Stephen Harper at that time, because he was Prime Minister, and the Privy Council, just whoever I could think of. So, and a copy of it, and I said, you know what? I'm not trustee. You guys need to intervene with this. So anyway, next thing I know, the case is adjourned. And when you go on BC Court Services online, you cannot see any sign of it under the legal name. But you can see it, the notice of civil claim, under my husband's name. But my legal name is even off his documents. They scrubbed my legal name off of my side and his side of the notice of civil claim. And they adjourned the case, and it was gone. So anyway, in the meantime, we end up leaving and moving here to Horsefly. That's where we are right now, off grid. We moved here, and the legal titles was put in my husband's name. Now, I work the farmers market in Williams Lake. We've got a company that we sell fermented sauerkrauts and pickles and preserves and stuff. Well, one day at the market, the health inspector comes by and he says, well, this is a high-risk product. This is a high-risk product. Remove this, this, and this. And it ended up being like over half of my stuff. He wanted me to remove from the table because it was high risk. And in order to sell high risk products, I had to go through all these hoops and do all this stuff, right? So anyway, I picked up all the information of what I had to do to get approval to sell my products. And I went, hell, I'm not doing this. And I'm not the trustee anyway. It's the trustee's job to protect persons and property, not mine. So they better do all this. So I put in a notice of demand with the Minister of Health and Justin Trudeau at that time and the Attorney General. And I said, listen, these health minister inspector assholes are bugging me. Here's their emails. Start with them, get them off my back. You guys are the trustee. You have to do this shit, not me. So anyway, I went back to doing my thing. And I used to do the horsefly farmers market on Saturdays. So this one Saturday, and you got to understand horsefly, it's a population of like 600 people. It's a real casual town. Like, you don't see anybody wearing suits or dressed up. They're all, rednecks. So anyway, I'm doing the market one day, and this man comes into the market and he's wearing a suit and tie on a Saturday. Comes into horsefly, right? He comes over to my table. He grabs sauerkraut and he pays for it. And then he looks at me and he said, name? And I said, Donna. And then he turned back and he looks at me and I said, Patterson, right? So he leaves and he was pissy. He was government. He was government having to work on a Saturday. That's what that dude was. So he leaves, and one of my friends, she goes, who was that? Right? Well, I knew that they had to buy the sauerkraut and they had to test it all. So anyway, I go back to the Williams Lake market and I'm selling all of my product. And the market manager comes up to me and she says, oh, the health inspector was here today. And I'm like, he was? They have not been back anywhere around me now for 4 years. I sell at 4 different stores, meat shops, grocery stores, health food stores. I sell at all these markets and garlic festivals. And not a breath from any health department dudes ever since that. So I'm going to backpedal just a bit and tell you something to do with allodial titles. My husband, like I said, he was working in a care facility and he had 18 residents that he cared for in his cottage. And one of the people in that cottage was a high-level lawyer who founded one of the major law firms in Vernon. And he was in this facility. And he really liked my husband because my husband, you know, this guy was an early riser, and my husband would spend time with him and sit down and actually have a coffee with him in the morning. And this was when we were in Lumbee before we had squatted on Crown land and stuff. But this guy, he says to my husband, when you guys do the markets, he says, do you pay income tax on all that money? And my husband says, no, we do that as a natural person. Well, this lawyer, his eyes lit up and he says, you know how you get an allodial title? He said, you sign legal title back to the Crown carefully. You sign legal title back to the Crown carefully. Now, that was before I had gone through a lot of, before I'd gone through the bankruptcy and like the foreclosure and the squatting on Crown land and the Department of Health. And I have been like on this mission of trying to figure out what carefully is. Well, through the bankruptcy, I legally separated myself as trustee from the registered name, and the trustee part fell to the Crown. So they both are trustee and administrator over that all caps estate, and I'm the beneficiary. It even states in the Income Tax Act that the trustee can make money under that estate, but it doesn't belong to them. Well, if it doesn't belong to them, who the hell does it belong to? Right? So anyway, in the law dictionary, there's a part in there that like there's a definition of equitable title. And in there, it states when you sell property and you have an offer for purchase and there's consideration given, so it's a valid offer, it's at that time that the purchaser has equitable title, but the seller still has legal title. Now, if the purchaser does not do all the terms of the sale, as in take off all of the subjects or pay all the money, and then in the meantime, there is another bona fide offer, then the equitable title then will go to the new offer. That's why when you go through a realtor and there's another offer, you've got like 72 hours to remove your subjects on the offer, on the property. So what my husband and I have done, this paperwork that I've told you what we've done, is last June, I picked up a for sale by owner kit in Staples, and we filled it out in the Donna hyphen Jean semicolon Stevenson name. And for the property transfer tax portion of that, I crossed it out, put not applicable, so I wouldn't give my social insurance number because that's what they want with the property transfer tax. And whenever you buy property, you'll notice that they always determine the seller's portion of the income tax and the buyer's portion of the income tax. And this is where Darcy's talk came in the other day, when I'm going, her contract is already shown by virtue of her having paid property tax, and they get you in there right away, right at the onset when you've purchased the property, because they get you to pay even a month's worth, even a day's worth, just a little bit, because that is your consideration in the contract for the property tax, the way I see it. Okay, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you guys got a process that does wonders, but this is how I understand it now. But if I have equitable title now, because I've paid for it, I have the receipts, I've done all of the terms of that. So basically, I can prove that I have equitable title to the property, but I haven't registered it, because that would then give me legal title. They would merge and I would become the freaking trustee, and I don't want that. Right? So if something happened to my husband, then if he has legal title and he's the trustee of the property, what happens is that legal title, that trustee part, falls to the Crown. And that gives me the allodial title. Now, I don't really know how to give like legal title to the Crown. I know the carefully part, but it's getting them to accept it that I'm sure they don't want, because it carries all the legal liabilities. So I think just what we're going to do is we're going to inform land titles. He's going to say to them, you know, I sold this property, I'm completely paid, but I don't want to be liable for the property tax and all of that. So I'm letting you know that I'm selling it, and she's not going to register it. So there we have it. And it gets pulled out of their system. So I'm going to allow, like, I want to hear what you have to say about the information that I just gave you.
Well, you know,
do any pieces come together?
They come together, yes, because the trust, they created a trust that's fiction, so they're liable for all the trust, right? And that's the bottom line, and they know that, right? But they turn
with me, they are right now. Like, they can't, because I moved to the beneficiary position that they had merged and gotten rid of.
So
and when I went bankrupt, your friend that's going bankrupt, an undischarged bankrupt is a beautiful thing. You were out of that Monopoly game. You know that boot that you take around the Monopoly game that's like your birth certificate, that you pay taxes and you go to jail and you buy Boardwalk? You're not really buying Boardwalk. You're getting this cardboard thing that says Boardwalk on it, but it's not the land. It's what, you know, it's that part of this stupid board. It's not the land that the board sits on.
Paper.
Okay. Now, what I've done is I'm the beneficiary of that thing now. So I can volunteer and use it to have driver's licenses or bank accounts and all this stuff. But I am not legally attached to it. And they can't make me attached to it. They can try and get me like to volunteer, but I'll tell you, when I say I'm an undischarged bankrupt in a courtroom, the judge leaves and the door doesn't even hit him on the ass on the way out, because they have no jurisdiction over me. And so it's 40 acres and my husband has legal title. I have equitable title. And when those two titles are separate, equity in law, equity always trumps law. When they're merged, the equitable position disappears and all you got is liability.
Okay. So you're not paying property tax now?
Well, that's why we have to inform them that he sold the property, because I am, you see, when someone has equitable title, when they purchase property, they can force legal title. They can force title, legal, but I'm not doing it. So it's like if you buy a vehicle from somebody and you've got the documents, but you're just going to use it for parts and you're not going to register it, you don't have to pay the sales tax on it.
Yeah.
You only have to get into that BS after you register it.
Yeah.
But then what happens is you sign that vehicle over to the Crown and they give you legal title and equitable title merged, and they give it back to you and you become trustee, so you don't own it. But you've got all the legal liability to do with it.
Well, that's quite fascinating.
Yeah, I'm just pondering this right now, right?
I bet you are.
Oh yeah.
But I'll tell you, I have lost everything in order to do this. And I'll tell you, they make bankruptcy seem like it's a real negative thing. And it is the most liberating thing when you realize what it's done, because it means that none of the acts and statutes apply to you. You can go build on Crown land. You can go work and not pay taxes. You can drive without a driver's license. And like, there's nothing that they can do to me. So I lost everything, but I gained everything.
Yeah.
And I gained a lot of knowledge in the process. My friend says if I was a guy, my balls wouldn't fit in a 5-gallon bucket.
Oh, well, I'm not gonna ask.
Donna,
you.
it's up. When you bankrupt, you have what?
When you go bankrupt, what happens is, and they don't want to tell you this, as you're this is the distinction. When you go bankrupt, at that moment, you're an undischarged bankrupt. And what they want you to do is discharge from bankruptcy, and it's a bait and switch. It's where they get you to become trustee again. And you don't want to discharge from bankruptcy, because you want to stay an undischarged bankrupt, because then none of the acts and statutes apply to you. Section 128, subsection 2 of the Income Tax Act states, for all purposes of the act, the trustee is agent. Well, not only does the Income Tax Act not apply to you, neither does any other act. None of them. So they can't attack me for like Department of Health stuff with me selling my product. They can't stop me from squatting on Crown land. And here's what I believe also, after a lot of consideration and thought. When I went bankrupt in Lumbee and I lost that house, the minute I signed into bankruptcy, I didn't really know it, that I became the beneficiary. I don't even think I had to leave that property. I don't think I had to lose any of my assets, because I was the beneficiary of it all.
I'll tell you one thing though. We're definitely going to get some reactions out of this video.
Yeah.
And it's going to be positive.
Anybody who, you know, there's a lot of depressed people who are about to go bankrupt and go through all of this. And I think that they could go through bankruptcy, and then right after the bankruptcy, if they go to take their house or anything, say, hey, I'm the beneficiary. You guys are the trustee. Screw off.
Yeah.
No, what we're gonna
I
use,
don't think I ever had to lose my property in Lumbee. But I didn't understand until like later when I started learning stuff, what I had actually done and the consequences of being an undischarged bankrupt. So you tell your friends or anybody that is undischarged not to discharge, because they're just putting them back in the bucket when they discharge from bankruptcy.
But what is?
You have to remain an undischarged.
What is?
Pardon me?
Process? What process do you have to go through to discharge your bankruptcy?
What you have to do is you have to prove you're a good little trustee, and that requires you to do an accounting of all your income and expenses each month, as if I didn't know how to manage my money. I mean, it was a $72,000 notice of assessment from CRA that caused it. You know, it wasn't my mismanagement of money. So you have to do that, but the trustee often also makes you pay a $200 a month or a fee. But to go bankrupt, it costs about $400 that you pay the trustee. And that's at the time that you go bankrupt. So that's after that, anything they ask you to do, paperwork, pay money, it's all voluntary. And I wasn't paying the $200 a month fee. And I got an email from the trustee, and she says, well, you're not paying the voluntary payments. I said, that's because they're voluntary.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I'm the beneficiary. I don't have to pay. I'm not the trustee. I don't have to pay. It's voluntary. And a friend of mine, his bankruptcy trustee took him to court because he wasn't paying and he wasn't doing all the paperwork. And so he took the guy to court, and the judge right there said, he doesn't have to.
Wow.
And he's right. He doesn't, he's a beneficiary. They don't have to do anything, because at that point, the Bankruptcy and Insolvency Act doesn't even apply to me anymore. No acts or statutes apply to me. Nothing in that, in that civil court. Pardon me?
You get your friend his court case when he was doing bankruptcy. You get his court case, ask him, we look at that court case where the judge says he doesn't have to pay. That'll be another ace for us, right?
But he doesn't have to. Like I had an email that said, you know, the $200, at the bottom of the page it said voluntary. Well, they make you feel stressed, intimidated, that you have to do these things, and you don't. Another friend of mine, he was an undischarged bankrupt, and he lived in Vancouver, and the police picked him up off the street, and they take him to these offices or whatever, and they take him into this back room, past all these cubicles, and in the back room is the superintendent of bankruptcy.
Is it possible to get a hold of him?
It isn't. And the fellow who is a friend of mine who got picked up in Vancouver, and they tried to make him do all these things, and he said, I'm not the trustee, he is, and he walked out of the room. And it was funny because the trustee went to say something, the superintendent said, shut up. Well, shut up meant he was right. So Jonathan is the fellow that I had told this information to, who had a website and posted it. And he is the man who had the guns pointed in his face and his computer and everything confiscated. And he lives in Vernon. I haven't been able to get a hold of him. I don't know why he doesn't want to talk to me anymore. It might have to do with guns being pointed in his face. I don't know.
He's still at the
website. They took it down.
Oh, okay. Everything's taken down.
Yep. It was taken down. I think like his phone was tapped. I believe my phone was tapped. yeah, it was quite a bombshell, all of this. You know, even this friend, he didn't understand why he could use the name without being the name. And I told him it's because you have beneficial use and you're not trustee anymore. That those have been, though that merger has been separated, those two titles, and the trusteeship has fallen to the crown. It was really interesting. My husband and I had our income taxes done by H&R Block in Williams Lake, and they got done, and then they sent us notice of assessment. And my notice of assessment, I never pay any taxes. It's always nil. And on my husband's, they had that he owed $200 or $350, but they had it that I had earned money, and so he couldn't 100% claim me as a dependent, and therefore it caused him to owe some income tax. So my husband takes a notice of assessments, and he goes into H&R Block, and he said, they're saying that I owe this money because my wife apparently made this money, when her notice of assessment says she didn't make anything, because I never claim anything. Because for all purposes of the Income Tax Act, Section 128, subsection 2, for all purposes of the act, the trustee is agent. I can't even volunteer for that. So she takes his notice of assessment and she phones CRA. And they hung up on her. She phoned 3 times. And each time they hung up on her. After the 3rd time, she says, okay, what is the circumstances of your wife's bankruptcy? And my husband said, well, Donna Marie Stancer, this accountant, and it was on the news. Like, she just screwed like many people, like a lot of people, especially that do taxes and are affiliated with CRA, know of this case. And she said, she asked, you know, what were the circumstances? Right. And he told him that it was like through Demera Consulting, this Donna Marie Stancer, that caused my bankruptcy, and that I'm an undischarged bankrupt. The bankruptcy trustee has been discharged, and the trusteeship has fallen to the crown. The look on her face, it was like this lady who worked for H&R Block, it was like a light bulb moment. Like, they got to understand corporations and corporate trust, but she didn't understand what all of that meant. And it was like, when my husband said that to her, the light went on and she was like, holy shit. She also told my husband and I that our income taxes are no longer joined. Here's why. They are trustee for my all caps name. I'm the beneficiary. If our income taxes were joined, they would end up kind of being trustee for his too. If that makes any sense to you. So they separate our income tax now. But the interesting thing is, under the law, my husband has to claim me as a common law spouse. But I don't have to claim anything because I'm not subject to the act. So it's really an interesting thing to witness. What has the goings on of everything. Now, there's another friend of mine in Vernon, Harold Isaac, who went to jail for a year over tax evasion. And he was an undischarged bankrupt, and they still sent him to jail because he didn't know what he was or what he wasn't. So when I found out about about all of this stuff, I wanted to have a meeting with him. And he was married and he had 6 children and he was an electrician. And what was happening when he take out an electrical permit to do a job, after he got out of jail, he'd take out an electrical permit to do a job, CRA would swoop in and take 100% of his earnings from the job. It was just horrible what they were doing to this man. So anyway, I phoned him and it said, well, I'll be in the area. I want to meet with you. I have some important stuff to tell you. So I meet with him and I tell him, you know, this story. And he says, oh my God, he says, they phoned me not that long ago, he says, and I told them that I was hopelessly bankrupt. And they said, oh, well, this is a different bankruptcy. He says, it's all part of the same bankruptcy. They stopped garnishing his earnings because he signified to them enough that he was the beneficiary. And it was actually illegal for them to be taking the money. He and his wife, before he had gone to jail, him and his wife had gone on a trip to Mexico. He told me this, and that while on his trip, they met another couple, and this man worked for Canada Revenue Agency. And they were talking about him being bankrupt and undischarged bankrupt, and they're after him and stuff. And he said, never let them discharge you from bankruptcy. But my friend never asked the question, why? Why is a very important question. So all these years, Harold did not understand the why you don't discharge from bankruptcy until I told him that in the process of going bankrupt and becoming an undischarged bankrupt, you become the beneficiary of the all caps name estate, and the trusteeship falls to the crown.
Yeah, I know.
Hi, Darcy.
I know a contractor who's been through bankruptcy several times. And so, you know, once should have been enough, if you knew all of what you know.
Oh, yeah. I gotta tell you this. Canada Revenue Agency gave me, like, this was years ago. They gave me an updated notice of assessment that now I owe $86,000, right? Not the 72, but now 86. So anyway, I ignored it. I get a phone call one day from Canada Revenue Agency, and this lady says to me, we have a taxpayer relief form that we're wondering if you want to proceed with. And I said, what? I said, first of all, I'm an undischarged.
Oh, geez.
It's got to happen at the most suspenseful part, right? So anyway, this phone call, I told her, you know, she's in jail right where she belongs. And of course, I don't want to go ahead with this. I'm not trustee. And like, no. Well, then she asked me the next question, which was really the question she wanted the answer for. Are you intending to discharge from bankruptcy? I said, you guys caused it. You live with it. I know I am. Fuck off. I have not gotten any notice of assessment, nothing, nothing since then. Absolutely nothing, because they know that I know. Because I told her section 128 subsection 2 of the Income Tax Act says, for all purposes of the act, the trustee is agent, and baby, it ain't me. I'm the beneficiary. So there is, thank you. That is my story. That is my school of hard knocks. But I got all the important answers. I mean, there's still some gaps, but I'm the beneficiary now. I don't have to pay any taxes. I have no legal liability towards that name. I'm out of the bucket. But
you might
my
be able
goal is to help others.
That's right. And so once we do get the people out of the crib and we do our time, if you could maybe come up and do that, let the people there know what happened.
But what I really need to do is help the most emergent situations. The people that maybe are going through foreclosure, that are thinking about bankruptcy, are bankrupt, in the process of getting discharged, which they shouldn't do. That is the emergency part of the whole thing.
Well, I can bring that up, right? And say who else who in the crowd is in this situation. Well, there's someone that can present something for you and we can work together that way then, right?
Yeah.
Because we don't know who's coming.
Bankruptcy is not the bad thing that they say it is. When they get you to discharge from bankruptcy, it's a bait and switch to get you to become trustee, the legal liability part of that birth certificate name again.
Yeah.
Just let it go. Enjoy being the beneficiary. Use it how you want without the legal liability.
Yeah. Well, it's going to happen to everybody coming up, right? A lot of people.
Exactly. Exactly. But they're going to say, oh, you know, you'll own nothing and be happy. Well, they can't, like, I don't know how much you heard about us squatting on Crown land in this whole story, but they can't take me into court. Like, I'm the beneficiary in trust law. You cannot harm the beneficiary. And that's when Elon Musk was buying Twitter, and he gave him such a really good offer for Twitter that the shareholders, which are the beneficiaries, if the trustees didn't agree to sell it, which was a great benefit to the shareholders, they could have been charged with breach of trust because it was in the best interest of the shareholders to get such an inflated price for Twitter. That's trust law. Mm-hmm. So now the Crown, they can earn money for that in that estate name, but it doesn't belong to them. It belongs to me because I'm the beneficiary. They have to work for the best interest of me. Pardon me?
Do they pay you?
Pardon me?
Do you get any money from them?
They don't. I don't have all the answers by any means, but I am very happy in my position to be able to be like Neo from the Matrix, and any agent that comes at me, I can tell them without hesitation to screw off.
Yeah. Yeah.
I truly, because I am sovereign. I know you say you're sovereign, but I can prove it.
Yeah.
Because I have my bankruptcy papers showing I'm not the trustee anymore. Mm-hmm. So as long as you're attached, you're legally attached to that birth certificate name as the trustee for that name, and all the laws apply to that name. But because you're trustee for that name, you're the one who has to do all the acting and going around the stupid monopoly board, going to jail, paying taxes, and everything on that board that they say. Right?
Yeah.
That's why. It's your association. It's your relationship to that birth certificate that is capturing everybody.
And that's through the signature? When you sign, when you put your signature on stuff?
Well, especially with the social insurance number. That is your agreement that you're operating as trustee.
Oh,
Okay. And now back in my day, when, mothers applied for birth certificates, they only got the birth certificate. When my daughter applied for my grandkids, they gave her the social insurance numbers already too.
yeah. And they're not supposed to get
Right?
that.
They
till they're-
want to, that social insurance card needs to be flung out somewhere, because that is, you're agreeing to be the trustee.
Yeah, and they weren't supposed to get that till they're 13 or 16 or something.
But that's what they're doing
Yeah.
now, right? You know, as soon as you apply for your kid's birth certificate, they make it really convenient for you to use the social insurance number.
Yeah.
Yep. So Darcy, I've been, thinking a lot about different people and different people's situation and remedies for all of them, because, in that crowd of people last night, and even you and I, there's people without mortgages, there's people with mortgages, there's
Yep.
people who are getting foreclosed on, there's people that are within bankruptcy.
Mhm.
There is all of these. And I think that an allodial title for you is the route to go for you, because you have no mortgage, right?
Yeah, we've had clear title as such, fee simple, for probably.
Yeah, but do you know what fee simple is?
Yeah.
Do you know what fee simple in the
I
law
know.
dictionary is futile. It's
I know.
futile.
I know.
But if you get an allodial title and it's I mean, you have to sign the legal title back to the Crown carefully. I don't know totally what that means, but if you were to do an offer for, this is what my husband and I did last June, because the property was in his name. So I bought it from him under the Donna Jean Stevenson name. For the property transfer tax, I just crossed through it, went not applicable. I didn't use the social insurance number because that name doesn't have one. It's not capitalized, right? And I've got the receipts that I've paid for it and everything. It's been witnessed. We had 2 different witnesses witness all the documents, and you just pick up the forms from Staples. It's a for sale by owner package that you just pick up there and you fill it all out, right? But don't register it, because then because when you have bought a property and you've done all the obligations of that sale, no subjects, you've paid, you've done all this stuff, you have equitable title. The seller has legal title. It's not until the realtors and the lawyers wrangle you into registering yourself and paying the property transfer tax that you end up with a merger of the legal title, equitable title, and you lose the beneficial portion of that, because when a merger occurs between the legal title and the equitable title disappears, and you become the trustee, and the Crown Corporation becomes the administrator. And so they become the de facto beneficiary in the absence of a beneficiary, because they get to administer and tell you to do all this stuff. It makes all this money for that Crown Corporation that you're not beneficiary to. So then they end up getting.
My mom and I are joint tenants. My mom's still alive, so my mom would have to sell it to me then. Instead of
Perfect.
Instead of being a joint.
Here's what you do. Okay. You buy it from your mom. You do all the documents. You do it all like legit. Get her to even sign a receipt that you paid for it or whatever. Okay.
Yep.
get a bill of sale. Then you've got equitable title, and your mom basically has legal title. So what happens is, if she passes away, the government basically becomes trustee like of her estate, because she's dead. There isn't a trustee anymore, or they hire some government flunky to manage her.
Well, I'm the one that has to handle all her will and everything.
That has to what?
I have to handle the will. My brother and sister are both dead. So I'm the only one that's there to administer the estate or do whatever happens when my mom dies.
Yeah, but what other assets are in the estate?
Well, my mom has 2 other houses, and she's got all kinds of stuff. So
okay, but if you've bought them from her and she passes, then the legal title to those properties disappears. There's no probate tax, and you can prove that you own it because you've bought it. You have the bill of sales. It's like when you say you buy a vehicle from a stranger.
So I could do that. I could do that with my mom's other homes too.
Absolutely.
Okay, I know what you're saying.
And then you don't even. And then there's no probate tax. There's no property tax. There's freaking nothing. Let's say you brought a vehicle from a stranger.
Yeah.
Okay. And they fill out, the documents you get to do that from the motor vehicle branch. They fill out all that and they put on how much and everything, and you pay them, right? That's a bill of sale, but you haven't registered it in all your all caps name yet. You're not trustee of it yet.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, the person who sold it, if they don't want any legal liabilities to it, because the government doesn't know they just sold it, they inform ICBC, hey, or whatever, just letting you know, I sold this vehicle. That's signifying to them that you're not trustee anymore. That if anything legal happens, it's not your liability.